Canada is in a depression as many Canadians can't even afford to put food on the table anymore, which is exactly like a depression. And you look at all the other indicators and it is becoming blatantly obvious that that's what we're in. More Canadians are living in poverty than previously thought, says a report. A new report from Food Banks Canada says 25% of Canadians are experiencing a poverty standard of living, compared to the official Statistics Canada poverty rate of 10%. So that is more than double. Once again, we see how Statistics Canada's figures aren't accurate at all. So you've got 25% of people in Canada that are living in poverty right now. And that has skyrocketed over the past 4 to 5 years, which is just insane because of the massive economic distortions. The report cites the MDI, the Material Deprivation Index, using Canadian data, and finds that a quarter of the country cannot afford 2 or more household essentials. And then it breaks them down. I'd highly recommend that you take a look at this report. It's very, very interesting, and you can see exactly what's going on here. Because if you look at what's going on, you can see that people, 21.7% of people in this survey could not afford an unexpected expense of $500. So say their car breaks down, they have a problem with transportation. That's going to be obviously more than a $500 expense likely. Spending money, if you wanted to, could you spend a small amount of money each week on yourself? 18.6% of respondents said no, they couldn't. Dental care, people are lacking that. Clothes, bills, gifts, special occasions, protein, footwear, transportation. I mean, all these different things. It shows how Canadians, or a large percentage of Canadians, are living in poverty. And if you look at what's going on in Nova Scotia, food bank usage in Nova Scotia is up again this year. More Nova Scotians are facing food insecurity in 2024, according to the head of Feed Nova Scotia. From January to May 2024, 169,000 Nova Scotians visited food banks, an increase of 21% from the same time last year. And you look at where the unemployment rate has gone, the unemployment rate's up, but it's not as high as it was during the pandemic. And we'll get on to why that matters in a minute. So 2/3 of Canadians polled say they desperately need interest rates to go down because people are lulled into a false sense of security by the government that if interest rates come down, everything's just going to be totally fine. I mean, listen to the finance minister here.
I want to start by talking about the Bank of Canada's decision last week to cut interest rates for the second time in a row. Canada was the first G7 country to cut interest rates last month, and we are now the first G7 country to cut rates for a second time. This is really good news for Canadians, especially for homeowners who currently have mortgages and are looking at the renewal of those mortgages, and for first-time home buyers. We're on the right path, but we know we have more hard work to do.
Hear that, guys? We're on the right path and we just have some more work to do, like just dilute the standard of living of Canadians down even more, because that's exactly what's happening. The standard of living is collapsing. Yet you've got the finance minister going on TV and saying, this is fantastic news that we're dropping rates. It shows what a great economy we are. Meanwhile, you've got the repo average volume skyrocketing, and you've also got the Canadian dollar tanking. And obviously all those things that people can't afford, like food, because so many people are living in poverty in Canada, are just going to continue to go up in price. So very interesting. New survey says the Bank of Canada's recent interest rate cut did little to change Canadians' negative perceptions about their personal finances. The M&P Consumer Debt Index, conducted quarterly by Ipsos, dropped 6 points from the previous 85 points, which it says signals increasingly negative views on respondents' debt situation. 2/3 of respondents say they desperately need interest rates to go down. Obviously, they went down. Housing markets have not reacted in the way that real estate agents were saying the housing market was going to react, and it was just going to boom. It was going to be like pulling back a slingshot when this housing market got going after these interest rate cuts. And obviously, that's not what happened at all. In fact, one of the only hot markets in Canada, Calgary. Even that market is now showing signs that it is cooling. You've got inventory that is up 20% year over year, and you've got sales that are off by 12% year over year. And meanwhile, you've got rental inventory that is at a massive high and up over 100% in 1 year. So that goes to show what all these people are doing. It's like we said on this channel, they are speculating. They're buying rental properties. They're speculating on future price growth. I think what happened was all those markets declining in BC and Ontario, all those house flippers and speculators, once they heard of the narrative of people moving to Alberta, they just jumped on that. And then the speculation mania just began with the narrative reinforcing it in their head. So very interesting what's going on there. 32% of Albertans can't cover their bills. And we were just talking about the Calgary housing market, and 32% of Albertans can't cover their bills. So, I mean, it doesn't matter if these are homeowners or renters, because if you think about who's been buying these properties and what's been keeping the housing market so solid and quote unquote hot in Calgary, it's been because of speculation. So if they're all renters and they can't afford their bills, well, that's bad news for the landlords. And if they're all homeowners and can't afford their bills, that's bad news for the homeowners as well. So in no scenario is any of this good for the housing market. So it's just crazy what is going on, but people are just blissfully ignorant. A new consumer debt index report from MMP suggests that nearly half of Albertans, 47%, are $200 or less from failing to meet their financial obligations. I mean, this is just freaking insane, guys. I wish I could use profanity, but there are kids that watch this show, believe it or not, so I try and refrain from using it. But this is just completely insane. It really is. And I just do not understand why people aren't thinking that something bad is going on here when you've got the unemployment rate that's skyrocketing, particularly in Alberta, particularly in Calgary, and you've got all these people who can't afford a $200 expense. You've got all these people in Atlantic Canada that are using food banks, that are living in poverty. You've got all these people in Canada, 25%, according to this new report, that are living in poverty. I mean, this is completely insane. And then this comes from a food bank as well. Busier than the pandemic times, local food bank chimes in amid government support. This was after the Saskatchewan government announced some support for food banks. But where are they going to go and buy that food from? Probably Loblaws, the big grocery store chains, and obviously the government doesn't create anything. So what does that do? That increases demand, which increases prices. Unfortunately, the governments, they just don't understand this. It has been a busy year. It's been busier for us than the pandemic times, actually. That's what the food bank says. And if you look at unemployment and what happened, it's just unbelievable, isn't it? Because unemployment was so high during that time. But because of all that stimulus money that came out, that kept people's head above water, but it really didn't last. It all got spent, and now people aren't saving. They're spending, running at a loss, running on the credit cards and running on debt. What sees firsthand how many people have fallen on hard times? What described one food bank recipient who didn't have the transportation to get to the food bank, leading Watt to collect the items and personally and offer delivery, only to learn they didn't even have a stove. I mean, this is just completely nuts. This is literally like a third world country. In fact, in most third world countries, they have cooking facilities. So it's worse than a lot of third world countries. I mean, it's just completely insane. This is going on in front of Canadians, and just, it's like they've got the blinders on, most people. I mean, I know us on this channel, we understand what's going on here. We understand that we're in this depression. But if you go and talk to a lot of people, they're like, I'm doing okay right now, so everything's fine. The economy must be rosy. Hey, they just started dropping rates. This is great. But it's just crazy. And then the Scotiabank outage that happened suspiciously last week, which was direct deposits, which we're not even going to get into speculating what that may be about, but it's never a good sign when you have these technical issues. But anyway, what came out on the back of that was so many people that were saying because they were living paycheck to paycheck, they needed that money ASAP, because guess what? They needed to cover their bills, their rent, everything like that, and they've got no money in savings. So we constantly hear these reports that Canadians are $200, $500 away from not being able to meet their financial obligations. But literally something like that happens, and then people are going insane because literally they're like, if I don't get that money, I can't pay all my bills. And luckily they managed to rectify the issue, and they did it pretty swiftly, although they did a bad job of communicating with customers what was going on and the issues. But Canadian banks, they don't have to have customer service because they've all got an oligarchy. They all charge very similar fees. And in my opinion, the banks have more control over the economy than even the government does. So it's really interesting. But yeah, you can see what this customer says here. As bad as things are right now with the economy, every cent counts, said Adam. So when you look into your bank account and you have no money or no extra money to do things that you need to do for the week and weekend with bills coming out, it's quite a frustration. And you saw this all over Twitter as well, that people were saying, I need this money, like I'm living paycheck to paycheck. And it's just an absolute crazy thing that in Canada, you've got so many people that are living on the edge here. But when you look at the size of this debt bubble, it is no wonder what is happening, because eventually it gets to a size where it can no longer sustain itself and people's incomes aren't growing enough. The inflation is going up and rubber is eventually going to meet the road. People aren't going to be able to meet their payment obligations. They start to default and declare bankruptcy, and all that stuff, the rates for that happening are just going up and up and up and up. And unfortunately, the trajectory of that is just going to continue going up. So anyway, guys, if you've enjoyed this video, I'd highly recommend that you check out this video here. And if you are looking for a VPN to protect your privacy, I would highly recommend ExpressVPN, which is the VPN that I use. The affiliate link is in the pinned comment in the description, expressvpn.com/marketmania. I will see you in the next one. Take care.